Chapter 11. 9 Types of Terrain. Master Sun said, according to the method of waging war, there are the following types of terrain: dispersed, easy, contested, intersecting, having a crossroads, encumbered, unfavorable, surrounded, desperate. When the feudal lords battle the enemy on their own territory, that is dispersed terrain. When one's forces enter the territory of the foe, but not deeply, that is easy terrain. When there is territory that is advantageous to me, and if I take it, but it is also advantageous to my foe if he takes it, that is contested terrain. When there is territory through which I may go, but through which my opponent may also come, that is intersecting terrain. Where the territory of the feudal lords is triply connected, and where the first to arrive may gain the host of all under heaven, that is terrain having a crossroads. Where one's forces enter deeply into the terrain of the foe, and are next to his walled cities and towns, that is encumbered terrain. Where one's armies must march through mountains and forests, precipices and obstacles, marshes and swamps, wherever the way makes for a difficult march, that is unfavorable terrain. Where the entrance is narrow and exit is circuitous, and where the foe can strike my host with a small number of troops, that is surrounded terrain. Where my army will survive if we quickly do battle, but will perish if we hesitate, that is desperate terrain. For this reason, I do not battle on dispersed terrain. I do not linger on easy terrain. I do not attack on contested terrain. I do not break off communications on intersecting terrain. I maintain diplomatic linkages on terrain having crossroads. I pillage on encumbered terrain. I march swiftly through unfavorable terrain. I formulate plans on surrounded terrain, and I do battle on desperate terrain. The so-called ancients who were skilled at waging war could cause the men of the enemy to be unable to link up front and rear, the hosts and smaller units to be unable to rely on each other, the nobles and the commanders to be unable to aid each other, the superiors and inferiors to be unable to cohere, the troops to separate and be unable to regroup, the soldiers who come together to do so unevenly. When an action is advantageous, take it. When an action is disadvantageous, refrain from it. I make bold to ask, if the enemy hosts are well ordered and about to come toward us, how should we await them? The answer: first, snatch away that which they are most fond of, then they will be more tractable. The circumstances of warfare put a premium on speed, so that one may take his opportunity unawares by a route he is not expecting, attacking him when he is ill prepared. The way of a guest army is to enter deeply into the terrain of the enemy and to concentrate one's forces so that the host may not conquer the guest. Pillage in the rich countryside so that the three armies will have enough to eat. Carefully nourish your soldiers and do not make them weary, so that they may conserve their energy and build up their strength. When you put your forces in motion, do so with calculated planning, so that the enemy will not be able to discern your aims. Throw your forces into positions from which there is no outlet. There they may die, but they will not be put to rout. Since they are ready for death, the officers and men will exert themselves to the utmost. The soldiers and their officers will fear no pitfall whatsoever. So no matter where they go, they will hold firm. Though they may enter deep into enemy territory, they will maintain their resolve and fight to the end if there is no other alternative. For this reason, such forces will be vigilant even without drilling, will fulfill their duties without being importuned, will assist each other without being compelled, will be trustworthy without being ordered. If you prohibit talk of omens and banish doubts, the troops will go anywhere, even unto death. My officers getting rid of the extra belongings is not because they detest material goods. Their willingness to give up the remainder of their allotted lifespan is not because they detest longevity. On the day when the order to set forth to war is issued, one's officers and troops may sit weeping till their lapels are soaked with tears, and they may lie on their backs with tears streaming down their cheeks. But when you throw them into the positions from which there is no outlet, they will be as brave as Wan Zhu and Cao Gui. Therefore, he who is skilled at waging war may be compared to Shao Iran. Shao Iran is the name of the snake that lives on Mount Heng. If you strike its head, the tail will come at you. If you strike its tail, the head will come at you. If you strike it in the middle, both the head and the tail will come at you. I make bold to ask, can armed forces be made to behave like Shao Iran? Answer: yes. The people of Wu and the people of Yue dislike each other, but if they encounter a storm when crossing a river in the same boat, they will help each other like someone's left and right hand. For this reason, if you tether your horses in lines and bury the wheels of your chariots in the soil, this is not a reliable method for keeping them in formation. If you want your brave warriors to act in concert as one, it is a matter of exercising leadership. to make the most of both the hard and the soft. It is a question of utilizing the different types of terrain. Therefore, he who is skilled at waging war leads his army by the hand, as easily as if he were dispatching a single person. It is because he places them in a situation where they have no alternative but to act in unison. Generalship requires calmness and reserve, correctness and control. The general should stupefy the eyes and ears of his officers and troops so that they will have no knowledge. Change your affairs, alter your plans, so that the people will have no recognition. Change your dwelling, make your path circuitous, so that the people will not be concerned about them. If the commander has an agreement with his army, it is as though they climbed up high and he pulled the ladder out from under them. While he leads his army deep into the territory of the feudal lords, he releases his men as though he were pulling the trigger of a crossbow. He burns his army's boats and destroys their cauldrons. He drives them as if they were a herd of goats. He drives them this way and that. But they know not where they are going. He assembles the hosts of his 3 armies and throws them into precarious places. This is the business of a general. The 9 types of terrain, the advantages of expanding and contracting, the principles of human emotions, these cannot be left unexamined. The way of being a guest is to concentrate one's forces when one has deeply entered another's territory, to disperse when one has entered shallowly. When one leads his army out of his own kingdom and crosses over the border, he is said to have entered inaccessible terrain. Where there are thoroughfares leading in all 4 directions, that is terrain having a crossroads. When one enters deeply, that is encumbered terrain. When one enters shallowly, that is easy terrain. When one has his back to solid landforms and is narrow in front, that is surrounded terrain. Where there is no outlet, that is desperate terrain. For this reason, on dispersed terrain, I shall unify their will. On easy terrain, I shall cause my troops to maintain a command structure. On contested terrain, I shall rush to the rear. On intersecting terrain, I shall guard it carefully. On terrain with crossroads, I shall solidify my ties with the feudal lords. On encumbered terrain, I shall ensure a strong supply of grain. On unfavorable terrain, I shall pass along the path quickly. On surrounded terrain, I shall seal up the openings. On desperate terrain, I shall reveal the spirit of being ready to give up one's life. Therefore, the emotions of one's soldiers are such that, when surrounded, they will resist the enemy. When they have no alternative, they will fight to the death. When they have crossed over to the perilous terrain, they will follow my commands. For this reason, he who does not know the plans of the feudal lords should not forge diplomatic ties with them. He who does not know the forms of the mountains and the forest, precipices and obstacles, marshes and swamps, should not march an army. He who does not use local guides cannot obtain the advantages of the different types of terrain. If one does not know the advantages and disadvantages of even a single one of the 4 plus 5, he cannot be the leader of the forces of a hegemon king. The forces of a hegemon king can chastise the great states, so that they will not be able to assemble their hosts. They can intimidate the enemy so that he will not be able to forge ties with other states. For this reason, do not compete in forging alliances with all under heaven. Do not expand your authority throughout all under heaven. Trust in your own power, and use it to intimidate the enemy. Therefore you will be able to uproot his cities and destroy his state. Offer rewards that exceed the legal limits. Deliver orders that go beyond administrative norms. You will be able to drive the hosts of the 3 armies as though you were directing a single man. Drive them to carry out tasks, but do not tell them the reasons why. Drive them with advantages, but do not tell them the disadvantages. If you throw them upon forsaken terrain, they will still survive. If you sink them in desperate terrain, they will still live. Even if one's hosts sink in disadvantage, they can still overcome defeat. Therefore, the matter of war lies in pretending to go along with the enemy's intention while directing your forces at a single spot in his perimeter. Thus, you will be able to kill one of his generals, even at a distance of 1,000 tricents. This is called using cleverness to achieve great things. For this reason, on the day which war is declared, seal the passes and abrogate contracts. Cut off communications with the enemy's emissaries. Hone your calculations in the temple in order to assess the matter at hand. If there are any gaps in the enemy's defenses, you must exploit them immediately. First, occupy that which the enemy favors most. Do not enter into any agreements with him. Before laying down any guidelines, adjust to the circumstances of the enemy to determine the affairs of battle. For this reason, at the beginning, be as still as a virgin. But when the enemy relaxes his guard, spring forth like a rabbit that has escaped from its cage. The enemy will not be able to put up any resistance. End of chapter 11.